63, Denison, Texas. Well, I played sports. Played football, a little basketball, baseball, golf. Senior year in high school, my best friend, his dad was coaching the Yankees, and his dad suddenly had a heart attack and died. So his name was Jim Fitzgerald. He asked me to help him coach the season out, rather than just leave the kids without a coach. So I helped him coach the season out, and the next year I took it over and coached it for 24 years. I think we went through one spell where we won 8 out of 10 years, the city championships, 8 out of 10 years. Those are happy days when, at that time, I think there was a few years there where we had 4 of you on 4 different teams, or maybe 4 of you on 3 different teams. And there was one year there or two that I coached one team and Patsy coached one team, and one of the other kids was playing on another team, and it seemed like we'd meet at the Dairy Queen and eat, and then we'd scatter off to ballparks.
How many trophies did you get?
Terry, that's a good question. And at one time I hoarded them. I really did save them. I saved all my trophies until I moved to West Texas. I moved to West Texas. I must have had 5 boxes full, and I finally threw them away. But I kept them until I moved to West Texas. No, I'm not missing anything. Did you lose something?
Daddy, did you lose something?
I had got my license when I was 14 because my dad had died a year or so before then, and so I got what's called a hardship license because my mom was holding down literally 2 or 3 jobs, and it was really, really hard for her to get me back and forth to school and the school functions that I wanted to be part of. And so I got my license when I was 14 and got to drive a car to school. But I had the job in the mornings. I'd get up in the morning at 5 o'clock and work at Hanson's Food Market, or Open Front Food Market, till time to go to school. So I would usually get to work about 6, and I'd work from 6 to 8. It'd get me about 2 hours work in the morning. And then I'd get out of school in the afternoon, and I would go to football practice or basketball practice. And then I'd go back to my Open Front Food Market or Hanson's Meat Market and either make hamburgers or work in the meat market until, 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I think Open Front stayed open until 9 o'clock. So I worked all through high school, part-time jobs, making myself money. So I always had money, and I was able to do as much as any other kid. I just maybe had to work a little bit. Mr. Hanson was a wheeler dealer. He would give someone so much money for a load of watermelons, buy a whole truckload of watermelons. That's when I learned to sell, because that didn't take me very long as a kid. I could make more money selling watermelons than I could working for him all week. I'd make a deal with him, put me out there beside the road in the parking lot, give me a percentage of what I would sell, and I'd sell watermelons all day long. And I'd sell a whole truckload of watermelons. When I was in high school, to make other money, I would go to the donut shops and say, I'd buy maybe 6 dozen, 8 dozen, $10 worth of donuts. And then I'd go out and sell them door to door and double my money. It was cool. And when I went to college, I did the same thing. I would, come home every weekend and work at the cotton mill and make me a little money. Somewhere along the line, I found out I could go back to school with 20 or 25 bucks and get in a poker game and turned it into 50 or 60, and I got to playing poker like every Sunday night or Monday night and make it enough money to last me till the next week. So I basically went through college playing football and working on the weekend and playing poker on the weekends. Every summer I'd come home and work at John Mansfield Pipe Plant, at the asbestos plant where everybody got cancer from asbestos. I would unload 100-pound bags of fiber. I was the only white boy, and unload those fiber cars all day long. I didn't have any skin or hair on my arms from the toe sacks, from carrying those sacks. But I would get me in perfect shape. I'd be in good shape for football to come the fall. The first car that I drove like mine, although it really wasn't mine, was a 46 Chevrolet. It was my mom's car, but I drove that car all the time. That's when I learned to drive in. The first car that I actually bought for myself, I went to Kansas City and I bought a 51 Studebaker. And I worked with Andy that summer, and I drove that 51 Studebaker all summer. Then when I came back, I bought me a 55 Ford red and white Crown Victoria. And that was my cat cool car for a couple of years. Then I traded it in on a 59 Chevrolet red Impala. Put a red light in the dome. Had two little mirrors up in front. Two little antennas on the back, and got it lowered. Coolest car in town. Drove that until 1964, and I got the first Mustang that was made and sold in Texas. I had it ordered for 3 months, and I got to come down and watch them deliver it off of the truck. Poppy red with black interior. No telling what it would be worth today if I still had it. But I did. I got the very first Mustang in Texas. I had a friend that worked for the Ford House. His name was Don Scherer. He had been a friend of the family. In fact, he was a friend of my daddy's. And we were talking, and he showed me a picture of the Mustang that was going to come out in the fall. And this was back in the early summer, and I told him I wanted to order one. And so he put the order in, and I got the first one that came to Texas. No one had seen them. Everybody thought that was the coolest car in the world. And immediately there was Mustangs everywhere. Well, I guess I'll have to confess and say my first one was probably a girl named Jerry Jo White. And I was probably, what grade are you in, Tara? That's probably about what grade I was in, maybe the 4th. I guess I'll have to say I was in the 4th grade when I got my first girlfriend. And I still have some old school books. And I have some, I was looking through one the other day in the garage, and I found an old book where it says, James Loves Jerry Jo. And so I was probably in the 4th grade. I guess after that I took the deep plunge and had a girlfriend named Nancy Monroe. You know, Nancy was pretty tight. By the time I was in the 7th grade, I had one named Gretchen. Gretchen Holmes. I still remember all these little childhood flings. I was married to Nana for 34 years. We got married in May of 1964. And actually she passed away then in January of 1998. So I believe that adds up to about 34 years. We were married for about, no more than 2 or 3 years, which wasn't a real long time to go without kids. But it was as far as we're concerned, because we wanted kids from the beginning. And all the doctors told Pat that she couldn't have babies. So we decided to adopt a baby. And so we adopted a little girl, Lori. She was 6 months old. And then a few months later, the home called us and asked us if we wanted another baby, and we said, why not? We adopted Angela, and at that time she was 4 months old. Then come to find out, Patsy was pregnant. So 6 months later, we had Hot Rod, and then she turned right around and got pregnant again. And a year or so later, we had Grinner. Then actually she got pregnant again. We had Little Phil. But little Phil just lived for 11 months. He was born with a birth defect. Phil was born with cerebral palsy because Patsy went into labor premature. And so from the time he was born, we knew that he had a tough row to hoe, and he lived most of his life was in the hospital. Got Laurie, the oldest, lives in Saxe. married to Mike Posey. They have 2 daughters, Reagan and Bailey. Reagan just turned 17, and Bailey, to my knowledge, I think must be about 14 now. Man, she's growing up too. Angela lives in Princeton, and she has a daughter, Tracy, who's my oldest granddaughter. Hard to believe that she's 20 years old now. Kelby, I think Kelby's probably, I'd say 16. Jeremiah, who just turned 5, and little Junior, who's probably about 18 months old now. And then Hot Rod lives in Plano, fixing to move to Kansas City, start a new life. Then we have my baby Grinner, who's married, and he has a beautiful daughter named Tara Starr. And Tara must be about 8. And she also has a little brother named Taylor Son, and a little brother named Tanner Moon. And I guess Tanner's probably, man, he's probably 7 or 8. 7. Okay. And Taylor also just turned 5. He and Jeremiah are the same age. They're within 2 days difference of each other. Pretty good grandkids, pretty good growing family. I enjoy them very much. Sue, when I had the game room in Garland, she actually was a customer first. She got to coming in the game room just as a customer. And then somehow she told me she'd be interested in working, at least part-time. She was working for the school district there in Garland. So she started to work for me part-time. And she hadn't worked for me very long. And all of a sudden, out of the clear blue sky one day, she asked me if I'd like to go to the movies. And I have to confess, I think I choked. I didn't know if I was ready to, quote, date per se. And I got pretty nervous, and I don't know if that's what made me sick or if I really did get sick, but I really did get sick, and I had to even break our date. And I didn't think that, she'd ever ask me out or go out with me again. But after, a week or so when I went to feeling better, well, we finally got together and went to the movies, and I have to confess, I was pretty nervous. I was about as nervous as you could be, because I really hadn't, although I had gone over a couple of other women's houses and had dinner, I didn't really consider it a date, but this was actually going to be like a car date where I would go pick up someone and go to the movies, and I was probably just as nervous as I was as a little 16-year-old going out on the first date. I don't know how many dates or how long it was. I can come pretty close because we started going out in August. In fact, I believe we'd have to check with Sue, but it was either August the 19th or August the 16th. She remembers the exact date. And in October, so it wasn't too long. In October, Angela and myself, we flew to Miami. While we were gone, I guess that old thing, absence makes the heart grow fonder. I would call Sue every night and talk with her on the phone. And one night I was calling her on my world-famous mobile phone, and we got cut off. And I could hear her, but she couldn't hear me. And I kept saying, I'm here, I'm here. And Sue kept saying, hello, Jim, hello, I love you, I love you. And I thought, dang, she loves me. Somebody's telling me that they love me, and I went back to my hotel room and I said, man, she told me she loved me. And I just thought that was so cool, because I have to admit, I thought I had turned into a pretty bitter old man. I really didn't care about too much or anything. And I'm probably pretty glad that Sue came along at that point in time in my life, because she showed me that, life goes on, the world goes on. You still have to you still have to live. And she really made it worthwhile for me to live. And we've had a lot of fun in the last few years. We're very compatible. The fact that we like to do the same thing. We probably both gamble too much, and we probably both like to travel too much, and we probably spend too much money, but that's what we like to do. And we like to do it together. And I'd rather do it with her than anybody. Well, the funniest story to me still is the Perry Colwell story about the dog. Okay. Tara, I'll just tell you this story. I had this friend, his name was Perry Colwell. And he was funny without trying to be funny. He always did funny things. I could just sit around some night telling you stories about him. But a typical thing that would happen to Perry was he had this dog that was about 16 years old. And this dog was in bad health. I mean, he had heart problems, cancer, heartworms. I mean, the dog was barely alive. The dog got in a lot of pain. So his wife, named Charlotte, takes the dog to the vet. And the vet says, Charlotte, we need to put the dog out of his misery, because he's not going to live and he's in a lot of pain. And she says, no, I'm not going to pay you to put the dog down without talking to my husband. So that night at supper, she talked to Perry, and she told him what the vet said. And he said, well, I'm glad that you didn't pay the vet to put the dog to sleep. I'll take care of it after supper. So after supper, he takes the little dog who's been in his family for 16 years out back. He takes his gun, and he decides he's going to have to shoot it to put it out of its misery. And the little dog keeps looking up at him with these sad eyes, and Perry just can't pull the trigger. So he goes in the house, and he gets a pillowcase, and he puts the dog in the pillowcase. And he goes back outside, and now he can't see the little dog. And he just shuts his eyes. And he goes boom, 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 shoots it 6 times. Goes over, dumps the little dog out of the pillowcase. He shot a paw off, shot a nose off, shot an ear off. Ain't hit one vital organ. That little dog just looking up at him like, what the heck did I ever do to you? That's pretty bad, isn't it? It's the scariest I've ever been. Well, I was always a coward. I've always been a coward. I remember when I was a kid, a family moved in about half a mile down the road from us. Had a real good-looking girl. I immediately said, she's my girlfriend. And I loved to go down to her house. And I loved to sit there and watch TV with her at night. Except I'd want to leave before it got dark, because I wouldn't want to go down those country roads at home in the dark. But if I ever stayed down there after dark, I'd get in the middle of that road and I'd run as fast as I could run all the way home, because I didn't want no panther jumping out of the tree and getting me. And of course, when I'd come running in the house, Mom would say something like, how come you're so out of breath? And I'd say, oh, I'm just jogging, trying to stay in shape. I don't believe so. I don't know of any major changes that I would look back and say. I wonder sometimes if I made the right decision going into management and moving my family to West Texas, what it would have been like if I'd have just stayed in Denison as a career agent with Farm Bureau. I'm sure I would have had a happy, secure life for the rest of my life. And as it was, I kind of went on a jet plane to the top and back to the bottom and back to the top and back to the bottom 2 or 3 times. I'm not sure that my mom ever did. I do regret that. I'm not sure that my mom ever did forgive me for moving to West Texas and hauling her grandkids away from her. She always, from the time I did that, I think that she thought I was a mean man. Taking her babies away from her. I don't think I got it. I have to tell you, especially Grinner, words of wisdom, because you made it happen. you believed in something so strong and you never gave up, and you worked at it until you got it. And I'll always admire that about you, because that is important, that if you want something bad enough, you really can achieve it most of the times. I wanted to be able to go places and do things and have things as a kid, and I found a way to do it, and I think that helped me later on in life. And I think somehow some of that's spilled over with you, because you've showed the same type of drive to get where you wanted to go. And I think that's great. Oh, the happiest by far that I ever was what you should be enjoying right now, the time with your kids while they're little. No doubt.